All right, Algebra 2, let's take a look at completing the square. Our essential question is, can you solve quadratics? Well, we have to know what a quadratic is to actually deal with it. So we are completing the square. A quadratic is an x squared. So we typically see it as ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. And we're used to solving these by factoring. So that's why we say they're always equal to 0. But now in this chapter, we're going to learn a bunch of different ways to deal with them. The first way that we're going to solve is not by completing the square, although our lesson is completing the square. Sometimes I call this one just solve, or solve by using perfect squares. So notice this one's already set up really nicely for us. And if I FOIL this, so let me show you what's going to happen. If I FOIL this and set it equal to 0, I have x squared plus 6x plus 9 is equal to 5, x squared plus 6x plus 4. There are no factors of 4 that add up to be 6, so we can't even do this. So what we're going to do is we are going to take the square root of each side, because when I do that, this square cancels out with that square root. And remember that anytime I solve for an x squared, which this would be an x squared, I do need a plus or minus. So to solve for x, all I have to do is subtract that 3 over, and we get negative 3 plus or minus root 5. So this is just solving using perfect squares. But we're also going to learn how to complete the square. And I'm kind of jumping around in my notes. So if you are looking at my notes, I have gone away. I'm down at the bottom, practice, because I think this is a better one to solve using completing the square. So we're going to have a couple steps for completing the square. And here they are. Our first step is we are going to get all constants. Hopefully you know what a constant is. In this case, our constant is negative 1 away from the variables. So I'm going to add this 1 to each side. So over here I have y squared minus 14y, and this is where we are going to complete our square. And that will make sense to you in just a second. Now I draw squares in because I like a visual. The next step is we are going to take half of the b term. Well, you have to know what the b term is, so I'm going to write it up here. This is always ax squared plus bx, that was an x, plus c is equal to 0. So notice my b comes before the term that is to the first power. So my b in this case is negative 14. Half of negative 14 is negative 7, and then we are going to square it. So negative 7 squared is 49. So I'm going to add 49 inside of my squares. Square it and add. So from here, our whole goal is to make that a perfect square, because I know the factors of 49 that add up to be negative 14 are y minus 7 times y minus 7. And then from here, we're just going back to solving with perfect squares. So we're back at the original, and we are just solving using perfect squares. And remember, to do that, I have a perfect square here. I have to take a square root. What I do to one side, I do to the other. This square is canceled out by that square root, so we just have y minus 7. Anytime I take a perfect square, or solving for a y squared or a w squared or an x squared, I do need a plus or minus. And I know that 50 can break down to 25 and 2. So this is really saying y minus 7 is equal to plus or minus, this 25 is 5 root 2. If you don't know how to do that, go back to my lessons in chapter 6. Chapter 6, simplifying radicals, is what you will want. And then from here, we're just going to add 7 over to each side. I always put it in the front, so y is equal to 7 plus or minus 5 root 2. All right, we're going to do one more for practice. The first thing I'm going to do is get rid of that constant, which is that 13. So when I subtract 13 over, I get negative 12. Then I'm going to go ahead and complete the square. I complete the square. Half of 6 is 3. 3 squared is 9. What I do to one side, I do the other. I usually like to draw them inside of a square because that just makes me feel good. From here, I need to make this into a perfect square. I know negative 12 plus 9 is 3. I know the factors of 9 that add up to be 6 are 3 and 3. I'm going to square root each side. Anytime I solve for an x squared, I need a plus or minus. And I'm going to take that I out. If you missed my instruction on imaginary numbers, look at chapter 6, section 7. It is there, imaginary numbers, or you could just Google it in my YouTube. And then I'm just going to solve by subtracting that 3 over plus or minus I root 3.